Alright guys, so we've got this pretty much all roughed out and machined up, ready to start some preliminary machining, and that's going to entail squaring this whole thing up and then doing a survey again to find out what we've got to take off where. So I'm going to start off by using this flat face here as a datum to work off. We'll clamp that down on the table with our finger clamps through the hole, and I'm going to give this back face here a lick. Then we're going to flip it over, run some parallels across there, and then just give this face a very light lick to start with. Then we're going to start setting things up on the angle plates to start doing the other faces. And as I said, all we're going to do at this stage is just give everything a lick, true it up, square it up, and then look at a map on how we're going to take off and what we're going to take off where. So now, before I start anything like this, it's always worthwhile, and I've been caught out with it before, because you don't know, this has been sitting around in my shop for a fair bit, because we're doing a fair bit of other stuff for the last couple of weeks. So it can cop little knocks and dings and dacks, so always just go through, just to make sure that there's nothing there that has raised the face up. It's going to catch you out. So that's not only on the part, but also on the angle plates as well. I've got little dings and dacks. I just give it a bit of a rub over just to make sure that everything is dead square. Everything is going to be dead square after I bolt it up, because these little things here, if you've got little dings over here, it's going to lift the part off. It's not going to be square. It's only going to be as good or square as what the piece of gear that you're working with. So we just give it a bit of a rub over. So I'm happy with that face. We'll get that all clamped down. We'll get ready to give that a lick across the back. There's a tiny little bit of rock in that, but that's because it has pulled a little bit during the welding process, but we have to start somewhere, and that's probably going to be the squarest or truest face that I've got to start with. All right, we'll bring you back after we've got this clamped down, and we're ready to give that compensating ring a little lick, and we'll give that a little lick wired as well. Then we'll flip it over and then just give the main face a bit of a run. All right, back on a tick. Right, I've got one of my finger clamps down inside this bore here, just clamping down on that 25mm plate to pull that down to the table. Now I've only just lightly nipped that, because I don't want to pull it down hard to get it to flatten out in that 25mm plate, because I'm going to distort this little box. And when I remove that clamp, that distortion is going to come back out. So I want to just leave that float as much as I can. So I've only just nipped it, and you can see that the feeler gauge does go under. A couple of spots where it's tightened up. Certainly goes under here, up there. So it's sort of 3 points of contact here at the moment, and I want to keep that. So I'm going to true this face back up, and we're going to flip it over, and I'm going to give that a truing up machine as well. So that should take out all the distortion and keep these two faces dead parallel with each other. Alright, before we start, because I've only got this nipped down lightly, I've put some fencing around the blocks just to belt some braces, just in case something does move. At least I'm protected. It's not going to come flying out of the off the table. So I'm going to take off about 0.1 of a mil to start with. I've just had that touching. We'll run that through and we'll see how that looks. Right, I'll have to do that in 2 passes, not quite wide enough to get, just missed out there. But you can see that it's taking a fair cut on this side, not touching on this side yet. So always worthwhile just doing that little lick just to square everything up and true it up. I'll come across a bit more, I'll do that in 2 passes. I'll go another 1 mil. As I said, we've got plenty of media to work with on this thing. Right. Righto. I can't even feel that transition, so my head's pretty well trammed up. I'm happy with that. Right, we'll undo this, flip it over, and then we'll just give that face a very light lick to true it up. And we can start working on the other side. So actually, before we do, I'll just give this a quick whiz over, just to see if we can true that up a little bit too, before we get too carried away. Alright, well, that was it, just under 0.2 of a mil, but anyway, at least we know that that's parallel to that face there. We'll set this up, we'll break the set up, flip it over, and then we'll just give that face a very, very light lick. And as I said, we'll start setting stuff up on the angle plate. Right, we've got this clamp down pretty hard on the parallels, so my parallels are running this way across my table, and I've got my clamp this way across the parallels, so there's no point trying to keep everything as stable as you can, putting the clamp this way when you're actually going to work off the parallels and actually deform the plate if you're hoiking it up pretty hard. So always work across the parallels, try and keep that as stable as you can. Alright, let's give this one a lick. Right, I might not be able to see this quite on the camera, but just a small band here comes across a bit of an angle that hasn't cleaned up, so we'll go another 0.05 of a mil, and that should clean up all right. As I said, we're just taking the minimal amount off. I'll make it 0.1. That should just about do it for us. Jeez. very hard to feel that transition, so very happy with that. Right, we'll deburr all this. We'll get this angle plate into play, and we'll start setting this up to do the cleanups of all the surfaces. Righto, so we're setting up this this angle block at the moment. I'm going to set up initially with one of my tenons that I set in the T-slot here with some parallels in behind it. I'll nip that up, and then I will run my dial indicator up and down the face to make sure that that is actually dead square. Because our machining is only going to be as good as how we set up our tooling. If you don't set your tooling up square, it follows on that the job isn't going to be square. So for me, I like to check and double check and recheck, because like a lot of us, I've been caught out before making assumptions, and it's caught me out. So even though I'm fairly confident that is going to be square, we will just run our gauge up and down and check it, and we'll see how that looks. Righto, so I've got this clocked up. Was a tiny little bit out from where I had it pushed up against the tenon, but there is a small anomaly with this plate. I've never used this one before, so always worthwhile checking out. It runs a fraction bit high out to the edges. I'll show you what I mean. So we've got a dip of around about 0.05, 0.06 of a millimetre. So we're looking at about 2 to 3 thou. But it's fairly constant between here and here, which is where we're going to clamp up to. I've also done a check on it with my tri-square, with my light gap, and that's absolutely spot on for square. So the machine that we're going to be doing, if that was out a little bit like this on this plate, it's not going to hurt us. It's important that it's square this way so we can get it machined up horizontal that way. So I'll have to do something about that at some stage and get that a little lick and true that up. But yeah, as I said, from where we're working, it's reasonably constant. As I said, that's not going to hurt us too much if it's out that way a little bit. All right, we'll get this set up. We've got everything buttoned down. We'll get our housing set up here, and we'll come back. Right, so we're going to do this top surface first. That 25mm plate, as you might remember, we'd actually machined that all the way around. So I've given that a buff with a stone, and I've got a couple of parallels sitting underneath that to square that up with the table. I've got my finger clamp, big finger clamp inside here, which is pulling that hard up against the face of the faceplate or the angle plate. What I do just to hold things in place while I'm getting things set up, these woodworking clamps are great. You can almost do things one-handed. Just move things around, clamp them up, get them right. If they're not right, just back them off a little bit. And they just give you that third hand, if you like, or that third arm, just to be able to hold things nice and in place for you while you can get some proper clamping into play. I'm only going to be taking, once again, very light cuts. We just want to clean this up. If I was taking heavy cuts, I'd probably put a big strong back across here and pin that off. Unfortunately, my G-clamps don't quite make the throat. That would have been my preferred option to get that clamped up, but these cheapies are just a little bit too narrow in that in that throat. So we'll give that a lick through, and we'll see how that looks. As I said, we're only going to be taking very, very light cuts on this. Just do a zero cut along there, just get the lay of the land. See where our high spots are. Now for my money, that's just touched a little bit here, touched a little bit there, so I'm fairly confident that's reasonably square. So I'll take off about 0.1 and we'll see how that pans out. Just want to feel this out to start with. So looking at my drawing, I've got around about 2mm to take off this top face. So we'll just give it the minimum clean up to what we need, and we'll move on to the next face. So we've taken just over, just on 0.1 there. I'll take another 0.15-ish. So far we've taken off just on 1/4 mil off that. Alright, we'll do one more cut and we'll take that to about 1/2 mil total remove. Right, that's taken off just a tad over 1/2 mil. We've still got 1.5 mil to come off that, and that's going to clean up quite nicely. That'll take up, yeah, you won't even see the welds in that. Alright, we'll reset up again. We'll flip this over, then we'll machine the base, and then we'll flip it up on the sides and square it up, and then we'll start machining the sides. And we'll get this thing all squared up in prep for a bit of a survey. And then we'll go on with our final machining. That'll give us our datum points that we can start measuring back to start doing our bore elements. Right, we've got this flipped up the other way, and once again, it's gone through with our feeler gauge just to make sure that everything is buttoned down on that. So I'm happy with that. Happy with that positioning. Right, one thing that's very important to do when you are doing this work is to deburr all those faces. Just get those lips out of the way, because they're the things that can come unstuck for you. You've got a small lip on there that's sticking out 10th thou, 15th thou. They can make a huge difference to the end result on this, particularly when you're starting to line up bearings and other elements inside here. So very important that you deburr all those faces as you machine them, if they're going to become a reference machine face again, or a clamp up face. So once again, we'll do a machine just across here to get the lay of the land to see where everything's sort of sitting and how even everything is. I'm expecting this to be pretty good actually. This is the face that we set up our reference for that face there. I don't know if we'll get this in one go, but I'd like to do that in a couple of shots. So I'm just going to drop that down about 100 thou from where our finished cut was on this face. So it's just touching on a couple of weld points there. Right, we'll go back to our last machining point on the other side. Another 0.1 more go and that'll bring us up to 1/2 mil. You can see a fair bit of sparking off the tips here. Obviously when we've welded we've created some hard spots on there. Ideally, you know, with welds or castings, it's ideal if you can get underneath the skin back to that softer metal rather than trying to skim over where you've got that really hard stuff. But it does harden up quite a bit sometimes, and I have destroyed some slitting saws by trying to slit through welds that have become quite hard. Also find the same thing with laser cutting. You'll get that nitrided edge on it, so if you can sort of get underneath the skin and not skimp on the surface, you'll save a lot of heartache on your tips. Well, let's take this last 0.1 out, and that'll get us down to 1/2 mil total off that, and we'll have another 1/2 mil hopefully around about to go, and we should get, I reckon, probably a 90% cleanup on this, maybe more. Let's see how we go. you can just feel a little tiny transition. Geez, a couple of thou at most. Alright, so I reckon another half mil will come fairly close to cleaning that up. This isn't going to be seen, this is going to have the underside feet bolted down onto it. That's why I've got this tapping block in here. As I said, we're only just doing the cleanups at the moment to get everything squared up. What we'll do next is we'll flip this around and we'll square up that edge on our parallels. We'll do a machine face there. And then we'll flip it over and do the last side. Then we'll do a survey, see where everything's at and where we're taking material off and where we have to try and bias it out a little bit. I hope this isn't going to come up too dark, but so what I've done is we've got this squared up, and this is a 0.02 mil filler gauges, which is what, about 7/10 of a thou, 8/10 of a thou, and you can see it drag on there. And you can see it drag on there. So when I put that up there, it's absolutely dead square. So we just had to kick that. It was just the tiniest amount that I had to kick that actually. So I'm happy that I got that pretty well squared up. Once again, we're just going to take a very light lick off the top of this. Then we'll flip it over, use that as our datum edge up against our parallel, and then do the final face. Alright, we haven't quite cleaned up here. I've probably taken off about 3/4 of a mil, 0.75 of a mil. This is the low side, so this is the one that if I want to bias this around a little bit, I don't want too much off this to get that centraled up a little bit. But I think we'll clean that up okay. Alright, well, we'll flip this around and we'll get set up and we'll give this last face here a lick, and then we'll see where everything's at. So we'll give that a quick deburr and turn him over. Alright, we'll set up to clean up this this last face. So let's get into it. Right, I've got pretty much 100% clean up on that. Right, we'll deburr that and we'll set up, do a survey, and we'll work out how much we're taking off each face to get it back to spec as per the drawing. Alright, so I'll get that cleaned up and ready.